love to do a special intro for our amazing guest today. Mackenzi Lee is a New York Times best-selling author, the historical fantasy novels The Monstrous Thing and The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue series. She's also the author behind Marvel's young adult books Loki, Where the Mischief Lies, and her most recent success, Gamora and Nebula, Sisters in Arms. Oh my God! Let's go, Mackenzi.
Wow.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks
great
for
to have you.
having me.
Mackenzi, let's actually talk about you. Come on.
Yay.
Yes, you have such great insight and being a writer yourself. I know the ladies here, we really want to learn about you first before we get into it. So I would love for this chance to kind of, show people a little bit more of insight about what the women of Marvel are up to and give you the flowers that you deserve. So my first question for you, Mackenzi, is what was your first experience with the Marvel Universe as a kid? I'm really curious.
My first experience with the Marvel Universe as a kid was walking into comic book shops, desperately wanting to read those comics, having no idea where to start or how to do it or who any of these characters were, and feeling like everything about those spaces were telling me, like, this is not a space for you, young 14-year-old nerd. And I was a nerd before it was, like, cool to be a nerd. I know now, like, the MCU is the biggest thing in the world, and Star Wars is the biggest thing in the world, and these are all the things that I was, like, secretly shamefully into when I was a kid. And so I didn't actually have any Marvel touch my life. That sounds strange. But I didn't have any Marvel in my life as a kid because I didn't know how to read comic books. I didn't have anyone to teach me how to read comic books. I didn't understand sequence and issues versus bind-ups and all of these different things. So my first experience with the MCU really came, or with the Marvel Universe came through the MCU. And my dad and my sister were really into the first Iron Man film.
Nice.
Okay.
That's so funny. Yeah.
It took him a while to kind of pin me down and get me to watch Marvel films. And then I really liked them, and the Marvel films really opened for me a door into getting into the comics and getting more into some of the other characters and the backstories. And so I'm very grateful to the MCU in particular for opening this world up to me.
So then when you first started getting into Marvel and like those doors did open for you, did you have like an immediate favorite character? Like, did someone speak to you?
Ooh, I don't think I had an immediate favorite character. I more enjoyed the world. So I was a big Star Wars kid. And I think I was attracted to Marvel for the same reason, which is it's all this bigger universe and all these stories interconnect and all these characters interconnect, and you have all these little Easter eggs coming through and they all relate to each other somehow, but their stories are happening in different spaces. And so I think I first enjoyed the Marvel stuff for that element of it and for this sort of wider connected world more than any one character specifically. I definitely latched on to Natasha Romanoff really quickly.
Yeah.
Because I always, as a young nerd girl, I just automatically attach onto the token female in any group of people, and if she's redheaded, that's a bonus. The first time I really got into a character was Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel, which I know was not that long ago. And so it's not that I didn't have a favorite character until then. I loved Captain Marvel. I love Brie Larson. I love that character. I loved getting into the comics. I love what Kelly Sue DeConnick did with that character and revitalizing it. And Captain Marvel was probably the first one that all the dots connected for me. 90% of the criticism of Captain Marvel can just be summed up as sexism, and I'm just not interested in having that argument anymore.
Here. Well, you're my friend now. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so we all love Mackenzi. But Mackenzi, I do really want to pick your brain. Like, you have a dream job, you know what I mean? I can't imagine making these creations. Like BK was saying earlier, you wrote a book called Loki, Where the Mischief Lies, and also Gamora and Nebula, Sisters in Arms. Like, I need to read these. I'm like, oh my God. But how did you react when you found out you were going to be writing for Marvel? And you said, when you were younger, you didn't even really know how to get into this world. I mean, I feel like this is the top of that world. You're a writer for Marvel.
It's still a strange thing where every once in a while I'll sort of be like, oh no, you have to get back to your real work. Stop writing this fan fiction. And I'm like, the fan fiction is the real work.
Yes. Oh my God.
I was talking to somebody maybe online about during events, I think about the Loki TV show. And somebody asked me if one of the characters in my book was going to intersect with the Loki TV show. And I was like, no, like that's just a character from my book. Like, that's just silly. And they're like, no, but that's like, he's like a canon character now. And there's a Wikipedia page for him. It's like, what is happening?
Got a wiki. Oh,
it's wild. It's wild. Every once in a while you just go through like phases in my DMs. I've gotten a bunch of people that are like, are these canon? And I'm like, yeah, look at the logo on this site. not publishing. I would be sued so fast if they were not canon.
Totally. Oh, I'd love to hear more about your books, actually. Like, could you tell us a bit about Loki, Where the Mischief Lies, and Gamora and Sisters in the
right here.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, got the art too. Oh my God.
I love that.
It's so beautiful, but they're both fantastic. Yeah, so the first one is Loki. So you get like greasy, teenage, angsty, young Severus.
That's what the people want. Give them what they want.
That's my type.
Ellen and I are going nuts right now. Ellen and I are going nuts. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Loki kind of earlier than we've seen him in his timeline. He's in Asgard and he's an emo teenager feeling like there is one way to be an Asgardian warrior and I am not that person, and everybody else is like blonde and has pecs and I'm skinny and have and shop at Hot Topic, like, and so he's feeling very othered and feeling very outsided. And then in the sort of inciting incident of the book is that Odin has a prophetic vision of one of his sons bringing about the end of Asgard. And Loki and Thor both make their own assumptions about that. Odin makes his own assumptions about that. And then that sort of spirals into the whole book being about, actually pretty in line with What If, because it becomes a book about free will and destiny, and Loki sort of wondering like, I know, it works really well. But the questions become about Loki wondering, am I destined to become a villain no matter what I do? Is this who I have to be? Do I want to fight against it? If I try to fight against it, is it not worth it? And then doing all of this while solving a series of Jack the Ripper-esque murders in Victorian England, because why not?
Our faces were like, nunny. I'm sorry, you can't just drop that in. Now that's when you buy the book, y'all. You hear that? That's when you purchase. Links in chat. All right, that's all I gotta say.
Gamora and Nebula in the comics are so different from the versions that ended up on screen in Guardians of the Galaxy. And now because the version of them everyone really knows is the Guardians of the Galaxy version, the comics have kind of started to like retcon their backstory a little bit and are sort of rewriting history a little bit on who they are. And so they're sort of before Guardians of the Galaxy timelines are pretty blank slate at this point, and there aren't a ton of comics about it. There's not really any there's very, very little stuff in the films about who they were before we see them in Guardians of the Galaxy. And so this one was so cool because Loki, there's literally 10,000 years of history you have to take into account when you're writing him.
Right.
And Nebula, we sort of see them in the films where they're in this place where they both started to recognize that they have been abused and traumatized their entire childhood. And they've recognized that, but they haven't figured out how to process that yet and how to be sort of their own people outside of that abuse and outside of their relationship with Thanos. And so the book sort of became around the emotional moment of them recognizing this abuse in their lives and recognizing that they've been pitted against each other their whole lives and sort of been fed all these lies in order to keep them apart and to keep them from realizing these things and recognizing their strength together as opposed to apart. So it's a pure sci-fi novel. There's no Victorian England murder mystery in this, but it's about Gamora going to a planet that has been strip mined essentially into nothing. And the miners there, the people who live on the planet are being exploited. They're being forced to destroy their homeworld and not being paid for it. And she gets sent there under mysterious instructions to retrieve the heart of the planet And then, of course, close behind her is Nebula, because Nebula is always close behind her. And so Gamora ends up allying herself with some of the miners on the planet. Nebula ends up allying herself with the Universal Church of Truth, which, if you're a comics person, it's a little bit of a deep cut comics reference. And then it's about how they come together and find each other and figure out sort of who's manipulating them and start to fight back against that.
What's it like being a woman working in a male-dominated space like Marvel?
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think that's because of a lot of women who've come before me who've laid a good groundwork and who have worked to make it better. And I hope that I'm doing the same thing for the women who come after me. I've sort of learned that I can watch these movies and I can love these movies and also be very disappointed in the lack of female characters, the lack of representation, the lack of development for these female characters, or their inability to exist without like a man to define their storyline. And those things can coexist. And I think it's so important to acknowledge the things, like we can love things and also be frustrated with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we can love things and also see places where they can improve and see a lack in them. So I've been very lucky that the team I've worked with at Disney and at Marvel, I have a female editor. I have women who work above her. Like there's been a lot of women involved in the process.
Nice.
BK, Kate, and we all stream video games. I know like BK was dealing with some pretty bad like hate raids recently. It can be tough being a woman in a space that is predominantly male dominated, I guess you could say. I'm sure that you have faced backlash before. Has it been overwhelmingly good? Like from what you're telling us, like it hasn't been awful backlash, or maybe you've just like learned to deal with it in a positive way, or just surrounded yourself with a great support system.
When the Loki novel was announced, this is actually the most like backlash I've gotten. And again, it's like, it's weird how the backlash is from people that you're expecting it from. You're like, I don't think you're gonna like this. I don't expect anything else of you, but it still hurts, even when it's not people who are on your side already. So with Loki, excuse me, I came into the Loki novel with Marvel saying, I want to make Loki an explicitly gender fluid and bisexual character in the novel. And they said, great. And we announced the book, and I had a couple of weeks and still occasionally get like really terrible DMs from people. And I have I've briefly chatted with Kate Herron, who's the director of the Loki TV show. And we had talked about this sort of being the vitriol, or being on the other end of the vitriol of a lot of these like hyper, I don't want to stereotype anyone, but I think it's a lot of hyper masculine fanboys who feel kind of threatened by the existence of not binary or queer people or feminine people in this world that has for so long been exclusively theirs.
So great hearing about you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and shouting out your books. Seriously, check them out. Support the creators that are out here making the content you want to see. This is it. They don't know we like it unless you buy it. I'm sorry. Go out there and make sure that you put your money away your mouth is. Thank you, Mackenzi. Any last words for the chat? Any last words?
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for talking to me about this stuff. You guys are great. I would love to come back.
Oh,
yay!
Love to have you.
Always welcome.
Thank you, Mackenzi. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. This was another amazing episode for Spoilers for Days. We dived into What If episode 4 and had Mackenzi Lee, an amazing Marvel writer, with us to share her thoughts on the experience of being a Marvel writer, and got to geek out with us about the show. So excited for that. And we'll be having more special guests coming with us in the future. We'll be having our watch parties every week, Wednesday, 5 p.m. PT, 8 p.m. ET, in the Queen's Discord. The link is in chat. Please come join with us, geek out with us. We watch them live in the chat so we can make sure we can be spoiler heavy the next day here on our show, Thursdays at 5 p.m. PT, 8 p.m. ET. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Shout outs to Jacki Jing. Shout outs to HelloIAmKate. Be sure to give them a follow. And I'm your girl, BlackKrystel. We'll see you next week.